And we are live, going live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream. Tonight's topic is going to be on uploading, and particularly this Amazon Prime show, Upload, which I've watched the full thing, and welcome to another live stream. Tonight's topic is going to be on tonight's topic.
Oops, I have this
this
upload.
Amazon
I'm hearing
show,
an echo.
Prime show.
This
Amazon,
Who's got the echo?
which,
That was me.
I had this open in like 3 different freaking tabs. Oops.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about this new show on Amazon called Upload, and then we're gonna go over like sort of the philosophy and science of like whether or not it's possible. Then we're gonna go over like the technology of like how close is this, and then we're gonna go to like sort of should we do this, like the financial aspect of
can
it.
you like
Is this the best way to spend our money?
sit back a little bit because your forehead is being covered up by a corner of my.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
how's that?
You're better now.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Any
all
thoughts?
right. You guys want to watch the trailer?
Any
Watch
thoughts?
the trailer before we start.
We could. I don't think they'll copyright it, will they?
Oh yeah, they might. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't. So,
What'd you guys think? What'd you guys think of the series?
Oh, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Very funny, very informative, very, it's a little, little cheesy in some parts, but definitely super exciting. But definitely way different than the reality of what we're about to talk about with, mine uploading, and then also even better than mine uploading and longevity. So
what parts of the mind do you think it's possible to transfer, and what parts do you think it's not possible to transfer, if anything is transferable at all?
I think it's possible to transfer the data. Like you could copy someone's neural structure and upload that information somewhere, but I don't think it's going to actually transfer the consciousness, as in I can't see through that information. Even if you attach eyeballs to it, you copy the information somewhere over here, you copy the neural network pathways, it's that identical copy. It will never be as though I can see out of that information. So it's not going to be my consciousness. That's why I'm not a big fan of uploading as a form of living forever.
My personal belief, what defines us and our mind is our memories. And I feel if we can retain all our memories, then that can retain who we are as a person. Because I feel our memories is what defines us and who we are and what we witness throughout life. And that's why, Alzheimer's patients, there's nothing of them left. They have nothing of who they once were. They're deteriorating in that regard. So I think it's more than just the information; it's the memories specifically. So if we can find some way to upload memories and hold on to memories, then I think that's
good. Brent, what about your views on mind?
Yeah, it's more than just memories, though, and we have to define what memories are, because every single cell in your body has a memory, and our bodies are made up of about 40 trillion cells. Some people might have somewhere around 100 trillion cells. My 5-month-old son, I would argue he's a person, and he doesn't have 40 trillion cells yet. He's still developing. But we know that the heart has about 40,000 neural cells in it, and we know that the heart at HeartMath Institute in Boulder Creek, California, just south of Santa Cruz, just south of the San Francisco Bay Area, they've been doing this research for over 30 years. Roland McCarthy is a guy who's the founder who I hope to interview soon. They show that the heart has 40,000 neural cells in it, and that they send signals to the brain and tell the brain what to do. So this is my thing when we interview Max Moore. I want to ask Max, hey, you just want to have your head cryogenically frozen? All right, cool. You might get some of that information stored in you that's you, but that's definitely not all of you. And I've just seen too many crazy things about organ transplants and certain things transferring in from other people's organs. Every single cell in your body, has some type of memory and information. So I just personally, the more that I know about biology and the more I've studied, the more I see like how incredibly complex it is. And I think these ideas that like Upload are super, super cool. They're fascinating. I'm a sci-fi geek at heart, and I watched just the first episode. I've been really busy, so I hope to watch the whole season soon when I find time. And I think the concepts are cool. But I don't want people to get too excited. We're not going to be uploading our minds into a virtual reality anytime soon.
I like that. We got a nice diversity of thought here. So we can start with everybody's views. We can sort of go over like the problems with it, but also the benefits to it. We can start with like Rowan, you got Google open? Google Images?
I was gonna show the trailer on mute.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But
Show the trailer.
I could show what type of Google image would you like me to search?
It's okay. You can show the trailer. I was gonna have you like pull up Rene Descartes, Descartes.
DES what?
Descartes. That's his name. So this was the first guy who really, in history, really talked about like mind uploading as like a serious thing. Before that, we kind of had like these vague notions of like the soul. Essentially, the soul, how it was defined in traditional Christian theology and by Plato, was essentially, look, I'm a person, right? And I'm capable of doing immaterial things like counting, right? I can say 1 + 1 = 2. That's not a material thing. That's a completely immaterial thing I'm doing there. So what in the material body is doing this immaterial thing? So what Plato said was, hey, there's probably a part of us inside our material body that is doing this immaterial thing, and thus that thing must also be immaterial. So that's how they sort of get the idea of the soul. And this is where Descartes comes in, what Rowan's just pulled up. He was this French philosopher in the Renaissance, and he came up with he noticed a problem with Plato's view, because how exactly do immaterial things interact with material things? Is that fucking possible? For instance, you guys know about like the first law of thermodynamics, right? Like energy cannot be created or destroyed. But it's also the problem of like matter, like creating matter and energy, which are interchangeable. So if I want to do a material thing, I need some kind of material cause to do the material thing. But an immaterial thing can't provide that. So that's where Descartes kind of got stuck. And then we'll get to Max's views. So Rowan, Rowan. I said Ron. Ron Weasley. Rowan, you could pull up John Locke. So John Locke was responding to Descartes, and he says, yeah, we kind of got this problem with the mind-body problem. But what Descartes says, what Locke says is that, okay, Descartes, what if you do have a soul, but what makes it yours? What makes your immaterial soul belong to your immaterial body if they can't possibly connect? And he gives this thought experiment where God could, a hypothetical God, could take out your soul whenever he wants and replace it with another one, and you wouldn't be able to know because there's no connection between the material and immaterial. So what Locke proposes instead is what Max was saying. Max was saying like your memories are what make you who you are, right? If you can remember doing something, it's got like a causal connection to the past. There's a narrative being formed through time. And basically the argument Locke gives is that Brent let me know about this yesterday, but John Locke was actually a criminal. Like he did some kind of like illegal shit, and he had to run away to the Netherlands from England.
This book kind of talks about it quite a bit. It's a really good book too, by the way, The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so Locke being charged with like criminality was like, what makes someone a criminal? Maybe if they remember the criminal act, they are responsible for that because there's a narrative, there's a causal link between the act of committing the crime and the person you're punishing. But he says, what if you don't remember committing the crime? Then are you responsible for it? And I think that's interesting coming from like someone who is like given this like label of breaking the law. But basically what he says is that the chain formed of like your memory and the memory before it and the memory before it are what make you who you are. So even if Max forgets his childhood, Max remembers Max as a teenager, and Max as a teenager remembers Max as a child. So there is definitely a narrative of Max being formed, even though Max can't remember his childhood. But there's some problems with this, and this is where we get to Rowan's views. And what Rowan says is, well, sure, you can upload your memories because your memories are nothing but a bunch of neural structures. And if you could get like the right kind of computer to scan it, and you can come up with a computer that has 10 to the power of 32 flops and 8,000 terabytes to upload it, then sure, you can just take all these memories. You can take the information between the synapses and put those into a computer. And then the problem Rowan gives is that, well, it's not going to be the same perception. Rowan's talking about consciousness.
Yeah,
so
I'm
consciousness
talking about like for instance, the
Yeah.
ability to think, the ability to
The
think
ability
of
to-
thought.
Yeah, so when I
That's
show this pen,
consciousness.
when I show this pen, Max is going to see this pen differently than Rowan sees this pen. And if I show this pen to like some AI computer guy, he's going to like C3PO. C3PO is not going to see the same pen that Max and Rowan see. Everybody's subjective perception is different. So Rowan, you can pull up David Hume, Hume.
Okay.
So David Hume, came up with another response to this whole like what is a mind thing. And what David Hume says is that, well, we're all capable of imagination, but it's our impressions, the connection between us and reality, that grounds the nature of an individual. And he says the mind can never have an impression of itself. So does the self truly exist in that sense? He kind of doubted Locke's theory of like memory. It's like, what if, for instance, what if I put Max into a coma for 20 years and he forms no memories of that process, but then he wakes up, he still has the same personality, but no memories of himself in the past. There are parts of Max that do persist. For instance, his reflexes, his mannerisms, the way in which he walks around. There's a type of disorder, a psychological disorder called anterograde amnesia, where you can't form new memories. So, Max, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler. Have you ever seen that?
10 seconds.
So there's a guy in it. His name's Bob, and like when Adam Sandler goes to visit his like amnesia girlfriend, Bob forgets who he is every 10 seconds. So he goes up to Adam Sandler and he's like, "Hi, I'm Bob." And Adam Sandler's like, "Nice to meet you, Bob." And then like 10 seconds later, he's like, "Hi, I'm Bob" again. Like he's got the same like personality, but like Adam Sandler just gets annoyed and tells him to fuck off. So it's interesting how like we still recognize the humanity of a person even once they've lost their memories. So Rowan has actually got a different condition for identity. Rowan says your identity is like the way you perceive the world, the way you like you think about the world. And what David Hume says is that
I think like I'm saying consciousness is actually just the ability to think at all, like to have and to recognize, okay, I'm thinking, I'm this thinking brain, here I am, and it's like you're seeing through your eyes, like that's what's consciousness.
Yeah. So now we get to Brent's view. Brent's got an even more nuanced view about like what is and isn't thinking. So Brent says like the heart, there's neurons in your heart, there's neurons in your stomach, there's neurons all over your body. So are those just minds as well? Because I don't think of my stomach as a mind. We almost never think of our stomach as a mind. But you can pull up Rowan. You can pull up his name's too difficult to spell. You could pull up Julian Lamettrie, Lamettrie. So Mettrie says like the consciousness is actually just an emergent property of like whatever's going on in the world, and I think that's what Brent's view is that you've got it's not just your brain that can be conscious, it's other parts of you too. For instance, like your heart can be conscious, your stomach can be conscious, even like your little skin cells. Each individual cell has a level of consciousness. So you sort of see this view develop where consciousness doesn't just belong to people. We're being kind of biased because we're humans, right? We only think we have consciousness, and like that's what Descartes said. Descartes said like, and only humans can have souls, and animals can't have souls. So I sure hope Descartes didn't own any pets, because I'd feel bad for that poor puppy or kitty or whatever. But basically, what Brent is getting at is, can we do this though? Can we put every particle in a person's body? Can we find an analog for that in the computer world? And what this new Amazon Prime series says is yes. You guys want to talk more about the movie and like how they sort of display the mind uploading process?
Yeah. So they display it as like your brain is literally like destroyed. So it's like destructive mind uploading, the worst kind. I'd be okay with mind uploading. I wouldn't think it's transferring my consciousness, but I'd be okay with them like copying my information as long as it's non-destructive and putting it somewhere else. You know.
So like a scan, like an MRI machine that like they do this thing where they inject you with like certain kinds of like proteins that are tagged with a fluorescent compound. They attach to your neurons and they light up, and then it tells the MRI where your brain connections are. I think that's pretty interesting.
But in this show, Upload, they like literally destroy the whole head. They burn it up as it gets scanned. So it's like a destructive upload process.
Destructive uploading.
Of course, that's the worst ever. Who would do that? You'd have to be really stupid.
So, do you think after it's destroyed, that he'll still have the same memories though? Do you think it's possible for him to carry over memories, even though he can't carry over perception? The character.
Sure, why not? But it's not him. It's just the data that was his memories. It's not him.
So he's effectively dead. That's the interesting part of this show.
Yeah.
So was there something else that could have been done for this person rather than just like destroying his brain and putting it into a computer?
keeping him alive.
Yeah, I'd say like finding the analog for the part of his body that broke and putting another one in.
Right.
But this brings us to another type of mind uploading. So you can on Google Images type in Moravec, Hans Moravec, Moravec. So this guy, he kind of like he was one of the big founders of the transhumanist movement. He says like, oh, well, it's okay. We don't need to destroy your brain. What we could do is we could get these like little like machines, like Neuralink machines, kind of like the ones Elon Musk is building, and we could put those in your head, like drill a hole in your head, put those in your head, and they're going to go in and like replace each individual neuron. Like they're going to form connections with each other, and like for each neuron you replace, like you do it very slowly, and gradually each neuron in your head becomes replaced with a mechanical neuron. And we just had an interview with Richard Hart, and he says some interesting things about this. That it's a very good point actually. That carbon things made of carbon, like our neurons, are not going to have like the same perception of the world as things made out of silicon, like these little neural probes are. So, in a sense, do you think it could be the same person if you if you keep all the connections between the neurons, but replace them with metal things, with like metal cells instead? Do you think it would be possible?
Probably not. I think at a certain point, if you replace certain parts of the brain with metal, probably lose your consciousness.
What if I just replaced like one half of the brain?
I think that would work because there is people who are living with just one half of their brain.
Yeah, there's a surgery called a hemispherectomy where
maybe it's the brain stem that cannot be replaced, or it's like the pineal gland, or it's a certain part of the brain that you cannot be replaced.
The interesting thing about Descartes is like the brain stem does have two halves. So like when they do these surgeries on kids, they can take away half of their brain. Like if they have like seizures, they can just cut their corpus callosum and take half the brain out. But what Descartes noticed was like he did a lot of like fucking mutilation on like dead bodies, and he's like, hey, I'm noticing like the one part of the brain that's not symmetrical is this pineal gland. So he said like, that must be where the immaterial world interacts with the material world. So that was just an interesting idea he had there. That's why the New Age community.
Can you do that voice again? You just did the No, you can't do it. You can't recreate. It's one of those things where it's like it was so authentic that you can't recreate it again. But it was really funny. Sorry,
okay,
continue.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and do Descartes. It looks like this pineal gland is the only part of the brain that's not symmetric.
And there we go.
So basically, he thinks like that's where the immaterial world's going to interact with the material world, because it's like the one part you can't just replace in a surgery, and that's why the New Age community really likes this.
I think it's also
like,
the Egyptians.
They call it like the third eye or the sixth chakra or whatever.
I think the Egyptians also called the pineal gland the seat of the soul. So a lot of people thought that.
What do you guys think of the pineal gland, Brent?
I think the pineal gland is super cool. It's still not well understood. You know, a lot of people think that dimethyltryptamine (DMT) is released out of there. I have my DMT, the Spirit Molecule book here. I've been trying to interview Dr. Rick Strassman, the author of this book. This book was written a long time ago, I believe, like in the year 2000, and it's very fascinating. Talks a lot about if you're not familiar with dimethyltryptamine, it's the most potent psychedelic on the planet. And enough about that. I do want to just bring up one point that I think is incredibly important here when we're talking about all these things with mind uploading and consciousness and all these things, which is that this stuff is still not very well understood, like at all. And even like the smartest minds who have looked into this still can't really even define consciousness, what it is. You know, there's all these, it's kind of like one of those words like God, religion, love. What do you mean by all this? Like we have to spend so much time just defining our terms and getting onto the same page that becomes like the whole live stream, you know? And so without like spending so much time on those things, we just need to all understand that these things are super, super not well understood. And so that's what makes this whole thing difficult. So go ahead, Alex.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, a good segue to an even more interesting topic is like, what the fuck do we mean by consciousness? There's so many definitions, and some people like, I think the most common misused definition, in my opinion, is essentially people like, since people no longer talk about souls, that's kind of been discredited with Descartes, because there's no way like the conservation of of motion, momentum, and like energy and matter doesn't like really jive with this whole like none of science really jives with the existence of an immaterial world. In fact, we can't even prove such a thing. Like we can't even prove. We have like no evidence for the existence of the soul. Like there's people who've tried to measure it, like dead bodies. I think Julian Lemaitre, who I mentioned earlier, tried to measure dead bodies for like how much they weigh once they die and the soul leaves the body. We found no such thing. There's a and if you can't find any kind of empirical confirmation of it, it's the exact same thing as not existing. So I can say every person has a like invisible unicorn in their head. You just can't see it or touch it, and it would be just as valid as saying you have a soul.
Alex,
Essentially,
term for churches, they say that we all have a veil in our heads. Have you heard of that term?
like a veil of ignorance. I've heard that term.
A veil of ignorance, basically, where we don't know everything. Like we have, so in the Bible it says when we die, we should have a perfect knowledge of everything. Like what I mean by perfect knowledge is a perfect memory of everything. We will be able to remember, 30 years ago on this particular day at this particular hour at this particular minute, this is what I was doing. There was even birds flying
that's interesting.
as I was talking. Like it's so vivid of a memory, you will be able to know it all. Like it's perfect of a memory.
So
and the best way to
in Christian theology, there's a concept called apotheosis, and that's when like you combine with God. And since God knows everything, and if you combine with God, you will know everything because God will like sort of absorb you back into Himself. But that's more of like a panentheist view.
But something that backs up that is, do you notice that there's a lot of times where like you see something that triggers a memory? It triggers something like, oh wow, now I remember that. I do see that.
Deja vu.
Exactly. So it's like it's there in your head, but you can't access that memory unless you're triggered from something else, like some other memory or something else that happens. Like, oh yeah, and then I can start talking about it like crazy, right? So I feel like that's the premise of the veil in our heads. Like we have all that knowledge. I feel like we have all the knowledge of what we learned even in first grade, second grade, every day of our lives, but we can't have a way of processing and accessing that information. And I feel like then that could be just due to the fact of the veil in our heads from the church of what they believe. And maybe there's a science to that veil that's in our head.
It's interesting how much this has in common with other religions, because in Buddhism, you have what's called a veil of Maya, and it's kind of like a veil of ignorance. Essentially, the universe starts with God, like the universe is God in Buddhism, and God knows everything and is everything. But sometimes the particles of God will arrange in such ways that create difference in the universe, and we are that difference. So we're perceiving kind of we're perceiving ourselves, we're perceiving like the illusion of a self, when really, and this creates the veil of ignorance, and it's the reason we can't know everything else. But it's the idea that like once we remerge with God, then we'll be able to be just like God, and like the kingdom of heaven is really just God resurrecting everybody at the end of time. It's kind of like this omega point idea. It's kind of like the big crunch in physics, where the universe collapses and the collapsing universe has infinite energy, and you can harness that to do infinite computations. And this is called the omega point, and it's kind of like this idea Max was talking about, where God just like takes the entire history of the universe and like computes everything you've ever done and just gives it back to you at the end of time. It's interesting because in the Bible it never tells us when the kingdom of God was supposed to happen, because it's never specifies also if it's like some place, like some other dimension, or if it's just the earth. Like it's the earth after the apocalypse, everybody just comes back and gets resurrected. So a lot of competing ideas there. But back on topic of like what consciousness is, that's a lot of people just like use it as a replacement for the soul, but that's not how like academics have defined it. So one definition was the one Rowan gave. So you could look up David Chalmers, and David Chalmers basically he has the exact same position on mind uploading that Rowan does. He says like you can never know really what it's like to be something else because you're not that thing, and it's scientifically unverifiable. So Chalmers says mind uploading will never be scientific. I know the title of this video is like the science of mind uploading, and here's where Chalmers comes in, and he says I'm not pro mind uploading because you can never really confirm this scientifically, because like how does Rowan do an experiment that the upload is him? He would have to be the upload. He would have to like if he scanned his brain and put himself into a computer, he would have to like get some kind of evidence that the computer has his perception, and all he can do is ask it. This is called the Turing test. So he's going to Turing test the computer. But computers, the thing about computers is they can lie. And here's where John Searle. So Searle is spelt. You can pull him up on Google Images too. Searle. So Searle says, okay, I got it now. I know what consciousness is. Consciousness is intentionality, and here's how we define that. Because the problem with like the Turing test is you never know if the computer's faking it. So I'm sure you guys have all talked to like chatbots, right? Chatbots aren't conscious. They have like a sort of an input and then an output, and then you no matter what input you give it, it will give you some output and only give
Maybe
you
your chatbots aren't conscious, but my chatbots. For what, Alex? No, I'm just messing.
No, that's interesting because essentially there's no intentionality when you're just taking in an input and spitting out an output because it's not up to you. It's like the computer when we program the computer, we say like we give it a list of instructions for every possible input. So no matter what Rowan types into the computer to Turing test his upload, the Turing test will always the computer will always find the appropriate response and give him the appropriate output. And this is what Searle calls syntax. So it's not really intentionally saying what it's trying to say. And then Searle says humans, we do intentionally say what we want to say because we don't do serial computing. We do parallel computing. Like we look at something and we do all the computations at the same time. It's kind of like superpositions, like quantum computing. Some people say the brain is a quantum computer, but I wouldn't put too much stake in that. But our brains do some kind of this like parallel computing where we look at something and we can understand what it is much more efficiently than a computer, which has to like calculate every single detail. Like your self-driving car on the street, it's gonna like calculate the width of the road. It's gonna calculate the lighting of the sky. It's gonna calculate whether there's a person walking across the street. Whereas a human can do that all like instantly. We can just do every computation in a different part of the brain. Whereas a computer has to use like a centralized CPU and run every fucking computation through that. So that's one way in which Searle says we gain intentionality. So he's saying things with intentionality are conscious and things without intentionality are not conscious. Humans communicate with semantics, meaning we mean what we say, whereas an AI communicates with syntax. It doesn't mean what it says. It's just taking an input, giving you an output. So he calls this the Chinese room. And he asks you to imagine that you're inside a room, right? Like imagine Rowan is in a room and there's in China. So there's Chinese people walking around the room, and they're passing him messages under the door. And Rowan doesn't know what the Chinese messages are saying. But what if there's a book on the nearby table that says that has a word in English for every possible Chinese symbol that gets passed under the door? So basically, Rowan just takes the Chinese symbols, runs over to the book, and spits out the appropriate message in English. And then he makes a girl outside of the room fall in love with him without knowing what the hell he's doing, what he's translating. So Searle is saying, in this case, Rowan would not have consciousness because he's just communicating with syntax. So do you think it's possible for this idea of consciousness? It might not be your consciousness, but do you think any kind of consciousness could ever be transferred into a computer, even though computers think so differently than we do?
Yeah.
Max?
It all just depends on what you define consciousness as, which is what I brought up. It's actually incredibly difficult to define because this whole Turing test thing started with Alan Turing, who's said to have created the first ever computer. A really good movie from 2012 called The Imitation Game. I highly recommend. Benedict Cumberbatch played Alan Turing, which is a very under-publicized story about how World War II was actually won through, basically cutting into the Nazis' codes and figuring out all of their codes so we knew what they were doing. And so that's how we won the war. It was an information war, and that's the world we're in now. So without straying too far from it, my whole point is that like the Turing test became this popular thing for decades and decades and decades. But we can't even agree upon like what the Turing test was because it was very vague, like what Alan defined it as, right? And as it's gone on more and more and more, like guys, I remember in February 2011, Jeopardy best players on the planet, Ken Jennings and the other dude, were beaten by IBM's Watson. I'm sitting here over 9 years later in 2020, and has our world really changed that much? Nope. Central bankers still dominate the planet.
Chess player, remember?
Yeah, that was back in 1998, right? And then AlphaGo a couple years ago. Oh, that's never going to happen. An AI will never beat AlphaGo. Will never beat the Chinese game Go. That happened too. Guess what? Did it have any impact like on our whole planet with our economy and the way the world works and fake news and COVID-19? Zero impact. So this Turing test stuff, I would argue, isn't even that big of a deal. You know, like I think that human beings are way more intelligent and specialized in specific ways that we don't fully understand or appreciate. So while I see AI and AGI maybe happening, but AI rapidly, increasing exponentially and technology increasing exponentially, I still am not convinced that we're anywhere near understanding what consciousness is or building like super conscious like AGI computers. And we've interviewed Peter Voss, we've interviewed I interviewed Ben Gortzel, and I'm sure our team here, the four of us, will interview Ben soon. He agreed to come on our longevity channel and do that. I mean, these are the forefront of AGI researchers. These are the intellectual AGI kings who are actually like trying to build these things, and we've spoken to them, and this stuff is like really hard to do. So the whole point is like, this show's cool, Upload, it's cool to think about, talk about, but we're super far away from this stuff. We were just on a 2.5-hour live stream with Richard Hart, and we kind of talked about these things too, right? Which, by the way, hey, before I stop talking, Richard Hart just tweeted our interview. So if you guys can real quick just go to Twitter and retweet it and like it. Yeah,
I'm on it.
Just real quick.
Speaking of Richard Hart, let's take this conversation in a different direction now. He says there's better things we can be doing with our time and money than this kind of theorizing about what consciousness is. So like Chalmers, he basically takes Rowan's view that it's just subjective experience or subjective thinking. And then Searle says it's intentionality, meaning a machine means what it says and isn't just spitting out inputs and outputs. And Richard Hart says instead of doing all this, what we should do instead is all the money we would have spent on AI research, we use that to give humans longer lifespans, essentially whether it's at the genetic level, the organ level, the tissue level, the cell engineering level. We give humans more time, and then using that more time, they can find new ways to give themselves even more time, and then using that even more time, they just keep extending their lifespans until they effectively reach immortality. And he says, once we've done that, then we can do all this like jerking off over AI and stuff. I think that's an interesting view, but the problem here is that there's people out there who do kind of like take this like mind uploading thing very seriously, and they don't understand where the technology is at, how close we are, how far we are, and I think somebody needs to explain to them what level we're at of computation, like how advanced are computers today, how advanced is machine learning, how advanced are AIs, and how advanced is our understanding of consciousness in the brain. Because a lot of them don't know. A lot of them just maybe watch Altered Carbon or hear about Ray Kurzweil, and they're like, oh, fuck all this like aging bullshit. Let's just go straight to mind uploading. And a lot of the videos on my channel is kind of like delving into these nuances about how the mind works and like how much we don't know about it, but also how far we are from actually being able to create a mind upload. Because at the present day, if you want like a mind upload that's accurate to the molecular level, as if we create a simulation of every fucking particle in your brain, that'll take 1 zettabyte, and that's essentially more data than every computer on Earth has, and it would take a nuclear power plant to run. So I think this here is much more efficient for now. But that doesn't mean we can't still talk about this movie for the people who don't understand this and need to know where the real technology is. Because I can see this idea picking up steam. There's Black Mirror, there's Altered Carbon, there's all these shows about like popularizing this mind uploading thing. And a lot of people don't understand where we are at technologically and how we define a mind.
Yeah. We could also talk about the culture, the futuristic culture they portrayed in this Upload TV show. They showed it being very degenerate. So like in their culture, there was like the next level of what do you call it, Tinder, where people just go and swipe left and they just, our future does not have to be that way, folks. So we can have like, more pure, can have a more puritanical type of future society that's not all degenerate and like promiscuous and like sledding around and like having sex with thousands of people.
Hey, Rowan, have you ever heard of J.D. Unwin? So J.D. Unwin's this guy who wants to basically bring back like Victorian era sexuality. Is that like kind of what you're going for?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not saying
because he says it's like our ability to suppress ourselves like sexually is what allows us to create civilization. So he's kind of taking Sigmund Freud's idea of sublimation, or sublation, where if you suppress something, like your body will channel it into something productive.
Well,
and like that's the reason he wants to bring back like the Victorian era like sexual repression.
Well, I'm into volunteerism. So there's going to be degenerate people doing their promiscuous stuff, and then there's going to be the people who want to be more pure and, like, you know, get married and be monogamous forever. So there's always going to be both of these people, and these societies are going to go both ways. Really, I think that's the way it should be. There should be both. There's going to be people who want to do what they want to do, but what I'm saying is you guys don't have to think that the future is going to be only one way, where there's just everyone's going to be degenerate and gross. I think there's going to be split offs and branches of people wanting to maintain like certain traditions and like marriage and monogamy. There's going to be other people that just want to say, oh no, let's just all be polyamorous and have 1,000 sexual partners.
I think the best way to predict the future is to look at the past and the present. And if you look at the past and the present, you know, as much as it doesn't really affect our lives right now, the people participating in this live stream and watching it, or watching later after this is, you know, done being live, we're not affected by the Amish or, you know, Yedenites or people who are natives in the Amazon or any other place on this planet living and starving in Africa. Like, we're really just not impacted by them in any capacity. So with that in mind, think about this moving forward. I think that technology and science is the way that we progress and improve our society in general. Those are the two things, and they're pretty much the same thing. We just use different words because you don't have technology without science. But my whole point from this is that we get to choose the value systems that we want to create in the world. And if we're going to really try to be rejuvenation, longevity influencers, then I want to influence people to think about building a more positive world. And for me, Upload, you know, I watched the first episode. Like I said, I'll probably watch the rest of them. Just more of like a dystopic future in many ways. Like, it's cool. The utopian aspect is like, hey, you can live like indefinitely or forever, whatever you want to use like language as, in this like virtual environment, which that's cool, and that's like utopian in a way. But it was done in this like dystopian way, and I think we really just need to address this. Like, I don't think that it has to be this way. I don't think that Hollywood has to stimulate our amygdala and have like an enemy and make things so dystopian and bad in a future world. Every single like Hollywood movie is like this, except for maybe Star Trek, which is more of like a communistic, like no money, happy, rah-rah, gather around the campfire and sing Kumbaya type thing. But even then, you still have villains like Khan, you know, and you still have bad things happen because you have to create storylines. But my whole point is, you don't have to have like super dystopian negative things happening to create intriguing, captivating storylines. So that's my general point.
True.
I agree.
Yeah. We need to make more futuristic movies that portray the future.
Rowan,
in
maybe
a good
we just
way.
have to do it. Like, when I say we, I mean like literally the four of us and the community that we're trying to build. Like, maybe, you know, we just have to create this, like documentaries, and then maybe even like, you know, if we get the right type of connections and network and capital, maybe we actually have to get in touch with producers like in Hollywood to create like a positive not utopian, I don't like that word, but a more positive portrayal of the science and technology future that we all want.
Yeah.
And it's got to be captivating. It's got to sell tickets, right? If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense, right? I understand that. I'm a capitalist. I'm a common sense person. So I think it can be done, is my general point.
Me too.
Well said. So yeah, I do think we need to like sort of give a more positive narrative of what's going on here. So like with all this pessimism, I think I can maybe few like arguments for like why maybe AI could be conscious or machines could be conscious. So I don't know if you guys were like around during like the or really into like this whole like new atheism phase. You guys know like the Four Horsemen.
I was
Four,
big time. Yeah.
Okay, Rowan, are you familiar with like the Four Horsemen?
Oh yeah, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and Daniel Dennett.
So Daniel Dennett, he actually has John Searle. He goes to his Chinese room argument, and he's like, whoa, this is total bullshit right here. He's doing like tricks of language to say that the computer isn't thinking. When what if thinking is taking inputs and giving outputs? Because he's saying like, what if there is no difference between like saying something and meaning it? What if we only think that we mean it? and really the universe is just deterministic. So what he does is he gives a response to Searle called the zombie argument. And he says, okay, we don't know if that Chinese room truly understands Chinese. We don't know if Rowan truly understands Chinese by passing that. But he's conflating Rowan's human brain with like an AI in the sense that the AI is just a more childish version of a person. So what he's saying is that Dennett says we can't truly know if any person is conscious, just like Rowan says. Rowan can't know if I'm conscious. I can't know if Brent is conscious, and I can't know if Max is conscious. And this is what David Chalmers says is this is the hard problem of consciousness. That's what he calls it. He says you'll never know what it's like to be someone else, so you can never truly know if they're conscious. So what Dennett says is, okay, Searle, how can you prove that not all humans are only just pretending to be conscious and only you aren't conscious? How would you know the difference? Like so what he says is like, even though I know that Rowan, Brent, and Max might be conscious, might not be conscious, I'm still going to treat them like they're conscious. So what Dennett says is, if an AI acts like it's conscious, we should treat it like it's conscious. Like, we should be moral people and not abuse it as if it was an animal or a inanimate object. And this goes back to like Westworld. So Westworld is another one of these mind-uploading like AI kind of transhumanist sci-fi movies that are out there now. There's a lot of them these days, and it's essentially about an amusement park where people go to abuse robots. But these robots give the appearance of consciousness. So Dennett is saying that, like, look, consciousness is just how you act, and if you act like a person, then you're conscious. So we should treat you like you're conscious. I don't go like shooting Rowan in the head. So why should I go shoot a mind upload in the head or shoot an AI at Westworld in the head when really it's the action, like the social connection, that makes somebody conscious. What do you guys think about that?
I agree with that. I agree with that
completely.
So this I don't just have books here. I have like a lot of my DVDs, and you guys know that I've been, researching and been thinking about these ideas for like a long time, well over a decade. And so this is the movie Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. A lot of people don't know about this. It's not as well talked about as
Wait, there's a movie? I thought I only seen the Transcendent Man.
Exactly. So a lot of people don't know about this. This is the book, The Singularity is Near, but this is the movie, and this was produced by Ray Kurzweil. There he is right there. And it was not the best produced movie, we'll just say that. Ray Kurzweil created this himself. And it's got like a backup. And I only watched it a couple times, and it's probably been 5 years since I watched it. But in this movie, they actually got Alan Dershowitz, the real, famous attorney, to come in there, and they played out a scenario in the future. I think it was like 2045 or so, where they're in a court, and Alan Dershowitz is the attorney who is arguing, protecting AI, saying like, hey, it's conscious, it's sentient, it deserves rights just like other humans. And of course, because it's Ray Kurzweil and the Singularity is Near, the Alan Dershowitz side wins, and it convinced the jury that, hey, if it looks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So in other words, if we do create like super conscious AGI or computers or whatever, and they convince us that they are, then we should like take them for their word and treat them that way and respect them. And we already respect private property. So if these robots are somebody's private property, which they certainly, will be to a certain extent, then we shouldn't just be able to go around damaging them and hurting them. But in the same respect, they should have to follow our laws and be programmed with our human laws in our society and be integrated so that they can't harm us. And the voluntarism principle that Rowan just brought up is so crucial here. And heck, while I'm doing it, I might as well. This is a Singularity on Blu-ray documentary. It's by this independent documentary filmmaker named Doug Woolens. It's a very phenomenal. I mean, this is probably like 8 years old now, is my best guess, and this stuff is still super relevant because, I'm like 35 years old and not much has changed, like philosophically. Plug and Pray is another really good documentary, and then this is another one that's probably about 8 years old, How to Live Forever. If you guys, this one's should be free on YouTube. It's always getting taken down and put back up, but this old British guy's funny. He's like, he said he was 101 years old. He died like a year ago a year after this documentary came out. But this guy was in Britain, and all he did was like run all the time and smoke cigarettes and drink beer. So, and in the UK, they call cigarettes a fag and they call a beer a pint. So he's like, I don't drink water. I don't drink tea. I'll have a pint and a fag, though. It's just a pretty funny little guy. But in any event, that's kind of the way that I see this stuff. If we do create these super intelligent, artificial intelligence or whatever, like robots, then we should respect them and they should respect us. That is absolutely paramount, foundation, crucial. If neither of those things work out, then we are royally screwed. So that needs to be programmed in at the hardware and the software. And I think that for now, I'm fairly confident that we're actually doing that after, interviewing people like Ben Gortzel who are actually working on building these things.
Yeah.
So that's a very good defense of like this. I think like a great support of what Dennett is saying is basically, why would we if something acts like they didn't used to think black people were equal to white people. They sure acted like them, but they didn't. The scientists of the time said they were like a different species. They were inferior in some ways. So they're like, okay, it's okay to own slaves because they're not like us. And in a sense, what Dennett is saying is like, well, if they act like us, they are like us. So it's kind of like an argument not just for AI, but for like human rights for like slaves too. But here's something that interesting that Richard Hart said during our interview is when he was talking about like, is mind uploading possible? He says, well, we don't run on metal, we run on meat. And this is where Searle, he hears about Dennett's response, and he goes back and tears him a new fucking asshole. So essentially, Searle says, hey, bro, you completely ignored my question. You're saying just because it acts conscious, it's conscious, when that's the very thing I'm trying to question. Searle says, like, we can't hold machines to the same behavioral standards as humans because they're not humans. And what he's saying is basically, the biological neurons are different from like synthetic silicon things. So if a biological cell on its own won't perceive the same thing as like a synthetic cell on its own, then why should we think that an entire brain made of biological cells will perceive the same thing as an entire brain made of silicon or metal cells? And essentially, he's pointing out that Dennett creates a circular argument by saying he assumes semantics is just information processing when that's the very thing being questioned. Searle is saying like, to mean something is not just information processing. To mean something is like a sort of almost metaphysical in a way. There's you can't put that into information terms because it's not information. It's a relationship. So what essentially Searle says we can dismiss Dennett's entire argument because, like, under the material comparison of a brain to a computer is like a false equivalence. So he's just dismissing the reply as being off topic, and that's why transhumanists in general like really fucking hate John Searle because he's like he would never support a robot rights movement. Like that's I think there's like a video of him saying like the whole idea of like robot rights is retarded because like they're not like of the same essence that we are, and transhumanists don't like that, so they kind of like compare John Searle to like they're saying like, oh, if John Searle went to Westworld, he would rape all the robots or whatever. And like I don't know if he actually would, but according to his argument, that would be okay. Max, what do you think about this whole like debate?
I love it, and I've always been very skeptical with it at first, but the more and more you do research on it, the more and more movies and everything else, it opens the door for so many possibilities. And like I said before, like even religions and Christianity and everything talks about the realm of like a conscious. So I like it.
So there was actually somebody else who came along like after Searle took out Dennett, Jerry Fodor. He's like a psychologist and a philosopher, and he's like, Searle is making another huge mistake because the AIs, like those chess-playing AIs, are nothing like the AIs of today. So the AIs of today are called machine learning programs, and they have what are called neural networks. And the neural networks reorganize based on like what happens in the environment. So in other words, they do exactly what human brains do. They just use like artificial neurons. And like if it gets the wrong answer for an output, then the feedback from the environment will make it reorganize. And isn't that how we think? So in a way, Fodor is defending the Westworld robots. He's like saying, no, do not rape the robots. They are actually just like us. They're using like machine learning networks to sort of reorganize their mind. So he's saying like Fodor is saying like he's saying, hey Searle, consider that the AI trapped inside the Chinese room can't understand language because it can't physically see, it can't physically hear, it can't physically touch things. It's just a Chinese room. So Rowan inside the Chinese room obviously isn't going to act like a person, a Chinese person. What you have to do to make it a robot, a person, is you have to give it like sensors for touch. You have to give it video cameras for eyes and microphones for ears. So what it gets kind of crazy because like what based on Fodor's argument, he's saying like self-driving cars might one day become conscious too. That's fucking crazy. Because imagine like with what Elon Musk is doing with Tesla is he's going to start sort of bring like he's trying to get like a monopoly on the self-driving car industry because these Teslas will be taking more data than the other car companies. Like the software will be taking data. And while one self-driving car isn't that smart, if it shares data with like 10 million other self-driving cars, it's going to get really smart really fast. So in a way, there's kind of like this fear that these cars might become people. And I mean, like what Fodor is saying is like, if I took Rowan and took his brain out of his head and put it in a jar, then it would not be the same as like mind uploading. And this goes back to what Brent says, like your mind is also your stomach organs and like your heart, the neurons connected to your heart. So what Fodor says is like, you can't just upload a mind. When you upload a mind, you got to give the uploaded mind arms, you got to give it eyes, you got to give it legs, you got to give it senses. So now this goes to Rowan because he's challenging Rowan's argument. Is Fodor is saying, hey, Rowan, what if, I know you don't believe in mind uploading because it's not perceiving the same thing you are, but what if we had the technology to make an eye for the robot that was exactly like your eye, and we had the technology to make it ears that was exactly like your ears, and a brain that was exactly like your brain, so it's no longer a chess-playing machine, but it's like synthetic neurons that are organized in the exact same way they would be in your brain. Don't ask how we would have the technology to do it, but he says it's hypothetically possible that we could do that. Do you think do you think that would be possible?
No, because you still have the problem of location.
Ah, that's good.
It's like my consciousness is here. It's in a location. So
Space-time location.
So how do you move a consciousness from this location to a different location? Like, you can only do it, just like Richard Hart was saying, by like moving the meat itself. So the brain, like it's all in the brain. The consciousness is in the brain. How do you get that? You can't move it anywhere. It's stuck here. It's stuck here. You can't just create a copy of it. You can't. You can't. How do you do that? It's stuck.
That's interesting because that's exactly what Searle says. So Searle goes back to Fodor and he's like, he thinks his argument is like the worst rebuttal that's ever been said for the Chinese room because he's saying like Fodor is assuming that all perceptive input can be reduced to ones and zeros, but what about space-time location? How do you reduce space-time location to ones and zeros? Because that's like a physical thing. That's not just something you can reduce to like a robot with cameras for eyes and like sensors for ears.
The closest you could do is take your physical brain and put it in a vat, a solution, and keep it alive, and then somehow hook it up to computers. Like, that's the closest thing you're gonna get.
Westworld robot.
It's the closest thing you're gonna get to an upload. But you have to keep the original brain. As soon as you get rid of the original brain, the original consciousness is gone. That's what I think.
Max, what do you think? Do you think like sensory organs are necessary for consciousness?
Max left a few minutes ago. He's in Kansas, so it's 2:45 in the morning. So
oh, damn.
I think he just didn't want to interrupt, and I think he bowed out gracefully.
Okay. Brent, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with Rowan on this, and I'm not saying this stuff isn't possible. I'm saying that it is super far out, and predicting a time on it is very difficult because I find even predicting what's going to happen next year difficult. I mean, if COVID-19 has taught our society anything, it's that the future is incredibly unpredictable, and the future is so much in our collective control. And so I think what I'm trying to do, and what I hope, our whole longevity team and the whole community should be focused on, is understanding that we do have incredible power to influence people and change value systems. I mean, that's what I'm in the business of doing, of changing value systems. I get pushback from all my friends and family, and Richard Hart just gave us the same pushback on the live stream, which they're all correct that, hey man, nobody cares about anti-aging and living longer, and like basically we're all crackpots in this community. We have to recognize that compared to the world. We're all weird as shit, and most people don't see things this way. However, we're data-driven people, and we look at the data and we're like, hey, aging is the biggest problem on the planet. It kills about 110,000 people every single day. And it appears there's things that science and technology can do to improve these things. So let's just work on them and let's just iterate, and we'll just see what happens. When it comes to mind uploading and all these things like that, when will they happen? Will they ever happen? Shit, man, I have no idea. But I'll tell you what, we need way more science and technology, people getting PhDs and entrepreneurs coming into this space for it to have any type of chance of happening in our lifetime. And I think that this show, the first episode, aspects of it were cool, the philosophies of it were cool, but I don't want people to like watch Transhumania's YouTube channel that Alex produced on mind uploading and get excited about that and be like, oh, that's what I want to devote my life to. No, you do not want to devote your life to that, because you'll probably end up dead. And you
want to devote your life to life first.
Yeah.
And then devote it to that.
You'll probably end up on your deathbed thinking like, oh shit, like I probably should have focused on like rejuvenation so that I didn't end up right here on my deathbed without even accomplishing the mind uploading in anywhere close to how they portray it in the TV show, or what we really want. We want it to be like the Matrix, like where it's basically feels the same and feels real. That's what we want, but we're just super, super far from there, from what I personally know about computer science, AGI, all these things, and from what we've interviewed people. I mean, I interviewed Ben Gordon a few weeks ago, and we're going to continue to interview these experts to get to the bottom of this. So like and subscribe, follow us, all that stuff, so that you can be a part of this and help contribute. But it's these are essentially pipe dreams for now.
Yeah.
I think Brent just nailed it. He just knocked it out of the park. Any final thoughts on this mind uploading thing?
Yeah, here's mine. To me, a more exciting technology than mind uploading is surrogate robot technology. If we can have surrogate robots that we can interface with through a VR headset, then we can do all the dangerous things like traveling, any kind of dangerous thing. You do it with your VR surrogate robot, and that's going to minimize your risks of dying from all this other stuff. So it's a perfect way to minimize your risk of dying. Like, even if we cure aging, right, there's 1,000 things that could kill us. So to me, surrogate robot technology is like freaking awesome. Imagine like doing everything that's dangerous either through VR or a surrogate robot, and then your body is safe underground in some bunker or something, and it's like, that to me is where the key is.
So go to your Google Images and type in Andy Clark. So Andy Clark is he co-wrote with David Chalmers. We mentioned David Chalmers earlier. He's the hard problem of consciousness guy. The guy who's saying like, well, I can't know if Brent is conscious or if Rowan's conscious because I'm not them. Basically, what he did was, with Andy Clark, he wrote this essay called The Extended Mind. It's probably like one of the best philosophy essays I've ever read. So essentially, he's saying like, how is your smartphone not part of your mind? Because essentially, before smartphones, we used to store our memories in our fucking head. If I wanted Rowan's phone number, he would just tell it to me and I would remember it. And then I'd call Rowan like, hey, Rowan, let's go do our live stream. But now I can just store his number in my phone. So what my brain used to do, my phone now does. And Chalmers and Clark are saying that the phone is part of my mind. It's literally part of my mind. And if somebody went and deleted all my contacts, that would be like committing a mind crime on me. That would be like erasing my memories. That's like some cyberpunk shit. And what Rowan was just saying about surrogate robots is that this is mind uploading. This whole time, when we were talking about mind uploading, we're talking about it as if we're supposed to put our mind like somewhere else, when really everything else is mind. And there's no difference between mind and matter. The two worlds of spiritual and material are actually the same world. So if you want to upload your mind, all you got to do is build a fucking surrogate robot and then move it around. It's obeying your will. So you did upload your mind by having a surrogate robot, just as you upload your mind into your smartphone. In fact, Rowan, Brent, and I, what we're doing right now in this chat is we're uploading our fucking minds to YouTube. That's literally what we're doing. And that's what, in this essay called The Extended Mind, that's what David Chalmers and Andy Clark are arguing. They're saying that this maybe a surrogate robot would be mind uploading, because it's a robot that's doing what your mind would normally tell it to do. And I think would all three of us agree that maybe that's probably the best solution, best alternative, rather than like sort of freezing our brain and cutting it up and putting it into a laptop or something?
Yeah, but like the thing is I go to the Woody Allen quote from there. I want to live on in my apartment.
Yes.
I don't just want to live on YouTube, I want to live on in my house.
Yes.
I want to live in this reality because this is the only reality I know is real. And as we also just talked about with the live stream with Richard Hart, I'm not too worried about what this reality actually is. Is it a simulation or not? I think the concept is cool. We like to ask smart people this when we interview them because I think it's a cool thing to think about. But that's about it. I don't really give a shit one way or another. People are like, oh my God, what if we are in a simulation? What does that mean? I'm like, doesn't mean much to me. I still love my wife, still love my kid, still love my dog, still like hanging out on live stream with you guys. It just means that this is all digital and we're maybe a science experiment of a 13-year-old alien or something in a different, parallel multi-universe. Whatever. Doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything here. Nobody knows the true nature of reality. Nobody in this reality that I'm aware of has any idea what the hell's going on. That's what happens when you become an adult. You start to realize that your parents are now just old versions of what they were when you were a little kid, and that you thought that they were like some super smart people, and in ways they are, but in ways they're just people. And you start to realize, like, oh my goodness, all these politicians on TV and these leaders and all these other actors that I've seen in these movies and all these people I've looked up to in sports and stuff, they're just a bunch of kids who got older and became adults too and faked it too. Like they're so smart or they're so wise or whatever. Everybody's just kind of faking it. Nobody knows what the hell is going on, basically, is what Richard Hart talked about as well too. We know almost nothing. We know way more as a species right now than we did 100 years ago. And that's cool. This is awesome live streaming with you guys right now. This is cool technology. I'm excited to see where it's going, and I'm hoping I'm on the forefront of this technology with you guys. But let's be humble and let's try to be honest and have some perspective. And we don't know what the hell is going on. But I love having these conversations with you guys. You guys are super smart, and we talk about some cool things, and hopefully we're attracting some cool people to all get smarter together. That's what we should all focus on, getting smarter together, focusing on upgrading our ideas, and not just clinging to the past, and being around people that are making us better. And if we have people that are maybe negative people, then we separate, which we'll have to do sometimes, right?
Wow, I really
Well
like
said.
that. That's so true.
I think we've finished up this. We can close the book on this mind uploading debate now. But now let's talk about how we get these mind uploading people to switch over to life extension. How do we get them to prioritize things?
Before we do, we have one question from the audience here.
Sure.
Salve says, do you believe religions in the future would synchronize with each other and become one, just like what the Romans would usually do with their conquered enemies' gods? So basically,
Yes.
Is there going to be a one world religion, or that?
So here's an interesting word for who said this?
Salve.
Soud. Here's an interesting word for
Salve.
you. Syncretism. Syncretism. It's when you have a religion that the people who worship it come into contact with another culture such that they're dependent on the culture. Perhaps it's a trade relationship, or perhaps it was an invasion, or perhaps it was the migrants from the Arab world coming into Europe. This kind of clash of civilizations. What happens there? And sometimes the outcome is war and genocide and whatnot. But sometimes the good ending is syncretism, which is basically a dialectical synthesis of the two religions. So you have Christianity and you have Islam. They seem very different, but there's a lot of commonalities there. And by focusing on the commonalities more, you kind of arrive at this greater understanding of each religion. You understand Christianity better by looking at Islam, and you understand Islam better by looking at Christianity. And I think you can understand both of these better by looking at Zoroastrianism. And I know some people in the audience are just like, Alex, why do you talk about Zoroastrianism so much? Why do you care about some fucking primitive goat breeding nomads in 1000 BC? And I was like, you know why I care about these primitive goat breeding nomads? Because if it weren't for these primitive goat breeding nomads, we'd still be primitive goat breeding nomads. Because what Zoroastrianism did was it introduced to humanity this idea of progress. We didn't believe in progress as these ancient goat breeding nomads. We thought time was cyclical. When we look at reality, we see the seasons. We see winter, spring, summer, and fall. So the Romans and the Greeks and all these ancient civilizations thought of time as a circle. It's a circle that repeats for infinite times. And essentially, it's saying that there will be a golden age, and then a silver age, and then a rust age, and then a dark age, and then a gold age again, and then a silver age and a rust age. So it's like that. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So this is what people believed. But Zarathustra, the prophet Zoroaster, was the first person to say, actually, I've noticed things have kind of been getting a little bit better, and maybe we should create like a philosophy where we plan for the future rather than just see the future as inevitable, like as a circle, like rise and fall. And he introduced the idea of like salvation and like a morality, like a judgment, like God judging you at the end of time. He introduced the idea of mind uploading. Oddly enough, mind uploading comes from Zoroastrianism. He introduced like Voltaire. You can pull him up on Google Images. Voltaire called Zarathustra. He called him he called Zoroaster the prophet of the Enlightenment. And the reason he did that was because essentially during the Enlightenment there was like a same kind of existential change going on in humanity. People were kind of rediscovering what progress was after this whole like dark age from the fall of the Roman Empire to the Renaissance. So Voltaire said he noticed like he actually coined the term Zoroaster. It was just Zarathustra before that. Zoroaster is just the Greek translation of his name. So what Voltaire says is Voltaire said when he read the Bible, he noticed a schizophrenic difference, his words not mine, between like the like kind of a multiple personality. What's the word? Is it multiple personality or schizophrenic? However you describe it. Voltaire is saying that the God in the Bible has two personalities, like an evil God who's very wrathful, orchestrating like a genocide of the Canaanite people. And that was a genocide. Like they'll be like, oh, the Canaanites were bad. But like, I mean, if you read the Old Testament, they're killing like women and children and they're raping people and shit. And like, that's all okay. But then you get the new God, like the New Testament God, and he's so loving and compassionate, and he preaches pacifism rather than genocide, and he preaches like anarchism rather than authoritarianism. And he predicted eventually one of these two gods would fade out of history. And what Voltaire says is Zarathustra is the first religious thinker in human history to propose a linear concept of time that accelerates and then becomes a singularity. So essentially, Zoroaster invented like transhumanism. He invented the singularity, and that was like not Nietzsche, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He had a book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and he basically uses Zarathustra as like the mouthpiece for his philosophy, because he wants to bring back this idea of like taking time back and like making it your own, like just overcoming the biases of the current civilization. This like kind of slave morality, like, oh, it's inevitable that whatever happens to us, and like you also have like slave morality, like Richard Hart was talking a lot about this slave morality. It will get close to death. They're like, oh, okay, that's fine. I didn't want to live anyway. Or like people, like old people with like who could have had healthy bodies are like, oh, it's okay. I didn't want to be healthy anyway. So that's like slave morality. It's like you're getting trapped in this thinking that, oh, it's okay. I'm just going to die and then my soul will go on to live forever. And Nietzsche kind of challenged that. Like people like they kind of reduce him to like this atheist guy, but he was so much more than just this atheist guy. He was basically saying not only can you rewrite religion, you can rewrite everything about humanity, like even the things we consider essential to ourselves. And he gets the idea from Darwin that like compared to the apes, humans are like so much more conscious, and he thinks there could be something even more conscious than us, a higher being even more conscious than us. And he's saying like a man was like doomed to like walk the line between ape and angel. That's Nietzsche's words. But yeah, it's interesting. Like this idea of religion is actually very important, and I think syncretism helps you realize that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all took their concept of linear time from Zoroastrianism, because it's essentially that's what they have in common. So if you want like peace between the Europeans and the Arabic nations who are coming there, you have to kind of get them. You have to kind of help them see the point of their religions. What was the point of the Islam? What was the point of Christianity? Because they get lost in like the little differences. Like, oh, you call him Allah and I call him Yahweh, therefore they're not the same God. I'm like, no, they're the same God. You just gotta like kind of find out where they came from, and they both have their roots in Zoroastrianism. Judaism has its roots in the empire of Cyrus the Great, whereas Islam has its roots in Muhammad's friend Salman the Persian, who synthesized his ideas with Muhammad's. And essentially Zoroastrianism was basically, when people talk about Western civilization, I ask, like, what is Western civilization? And they'll be like, Sparta. Sparta is nothing like Western civilization. It was a fucking dystopia. It was closer to like maybe like Stalinist Russia than it is to like Enlightenment Europe. And Voltaire says it was actually Zoroaster who was like the hero of the Enlightenment, because if you look at the Zoroastrians, they rejected the caste system of India. Like, they were the first religion to have this concept of social justice. Like, everyone has an inner light, and no one is superior to everyone else, and nobody deserves to be like a slave from everyone else. Also, in the Gathas, which is the Zoroastrian Bible, in the Gathas, Zarathustra talks about like ecology. He defines like the relationship with the environment, like climate change and shit. He says Zarathustra says Mother Nature like cries out for someone to save her from the plunderers who destroy the land, and he insists that like humans should go out and create more agriculture and more permaculture and like green up the world to like help Mother Nature. So he's like the first one with this idea of like not just like nature worship, because the pagans did plenty of that, but improving on nature. And Zarathustra says like when we improve on nature, humans are part of nature, therefore we improve on humans. When we improve the environment, we improve people. So he's essentially like very pro. Another one is like respect for women. So Zoroastrianism actually had women's rights. Like it had like the most progressive concept of women's rights in the ancient world. And in fact, like the Greeks and the Egyptians and like every other ancient civilization made fun of the Persians for like being under the thumb of their women, because in Persia, women were allowed to own property, they were allowed to own businesses, and like because essentially that inner light, which Zarathustra talks about, that applies to women too. So gender equality was like a core tenet of Zoroastrianism. And I'm not talking about like the modern feminism. I'm talking about like just the idea that men should be subject equally to the law as men and women should be subject equally to the law, and one shouldn't be forced to serve the other as like a slave. So that was very progressive, because in Sparta, women were basically just sex slaves, but in Persia, they were allowed to live their lives. So I think that's I hope that answers your question. Was it Saud? Yeah, I hope that answers your question, that why syncretism happens and why it's good for civilization rather than bad.
Boom. Knowledge bomb.
Yeah, that was a long tangent. So anyway, we were talking about like how do we get these mind uploading people to return to aging, like to return to solving aging rather than mind uploading. Do you guys have like a plan for how do we convince these people to come back?
We're doing it, brother. We're on live stream right now, converting. And this is just a live stream right now. Who knows if our influence grows and we're successful and we get more followers, subscribers across social media, and more people know who we are, then they'll go back in time. I mean, YouTube isn't going away. These videos aren't going away. We're building on concepts and ideas that are not going away anytime soon, and they're probably just going to become more and more popular. Rejuvenation, integration with technology. And so maybe the year is 2026 and you're watching this right now and watching us talk about this, and who knows? So it's the future is uncertain and we're not sure, but I think we know more than most people about where this is going, and we're asking the smartest people we know for their opinions, right?
Let me just, sorry to interject, but let me just respond to another comment. Kyle Murphy says, what do you guys believe to be the shape of our planet? Do you guys believe what the Bible says about modern science? So the Bible says the world is flat, and science says it's round. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say the Bible is not a science textbook. It is a civilization textbook. Like, essentially, what I said before is life was hell before these Abrahamic religions. Like, life was hell before Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Christianity actually got people to give a shit about society, because they didn't give a shit about society. They're like, oh, it's just the circle of life. Everything is inevitable. Decay is inevitable. This idea of the soul that the Abrahamic religions, including Zoroastrianism, brought in was basically mind uploading, like what you guys are looking for. That's why you're attracted to this idea so much, is because I think it comes from our religions. But don't look at the Bible as a science textbook. Look at it as like a morality textbook. It's more like you can, not even as rules, but as like guidelines. It's cut from Pirates of the Caribbean there. But essentially, just as the Bible the Bible also has its roots. Like the biblical morals also have their roots in Zoroastrianism, because you notice like the Christian civilizations were the first to create this like feminist like concept of equal rights for men and women. It took them a long time. It took them till the Enlightenment, but essentially they were able to do what the pagan religions with like a circular concept of time weren't able to do. There were some exceptions, of course, like the Iroquois in the Iroquois. Is it Iroquois or Iroquois? But it's like Indians in North America.
I thought it was Iroquois, but who knows?
They had some concept of like women being people, and some of these other religions. But for the most part, you don't want to be the average pagan religion, say for instance like the Roman religion. What Cyrus the Great did, the Persian emperor who made Zoroastrianism like the state religion, or led to it becoming the state religion, was he created the first constitution. So another more evidence that Western civilization comes from this religion is that he created what's called the Cyrus cylinder. So Rowan, you can look this up on Google Images. This is super interesting. The Cyrus cylinder. So this was basically the Constitution, and on it there was a what was called the Doctrine of Religious Freedom. So basically the First Amendment. They had a constitution with the First Amendment, and they said you can worship whatever religion you want in the Persian Empire. That's fucking fascinating, because in ancient Greece, if you don't accept the interpretation of the polytheistic gods that Athens did, they'd fucking kill you. And if you don't accept the Spartan interpretations, they'll fucking kill you. But this idea of like religious tolerance, this is what led to syncretism. So the idea of like peace between religions is really important, and it comes from this very primitive version of the Constitution that would eventually be adopted by the sort of Roman republics, and then from there adopted by the founding fathers, and then from there adopted back by like the French and all the other Europeans when they went through the Enlightenment process. But yeah, I mean, I know you've seen like the movie 300, and the Persians look really weird there. I'm saying like just like fuck 300. It's like so historically inaccurate. It's insane. Like it'll make you cringe.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't even trying to be historically accurate though. That was just a major Hollywood production.
Yeah. I think a lot of it came from like 9/11. Like 9/11 happened, so we had to demonize people in the Middle East. So we made them like African people with rhinos. Holy shit!
Right.
That movie. But yeah, it's don't take it too seriously. They weren't that like I think if I had the choice where to live in the ancient civilization, I would rather live in like Persia than in Sparta. Just saying. But yeah, so here's in terms of getting like the mind uploading people to care about life extension again, we have to first look at the reason why they don't care about life extension. And I think a lot of it, I hate to say this, has to do with aesthetics. So they're just really attracted to the aesthetics of like mind uploading and cyberpunk and shit. Like Blade Runner, Altered Carbon, you can't deny that these movies have a certain kind of aesthetic to them. And they're more attracted to that when they think of transhumanism than they are to say like artificial organs or like gene editing or like fucking being healthy and being fit or whatever. They're just to those aesthetics. So how do you think we should aestheticize life extension to get them back over? Do they have any ideas, Rowan or Brent? Either of you?
Rowan?
Show them very fit, healthy people who eat healthy and eat peanut butter and say, look, doesn't this look fun? Look at all this peanut butter.
That's a good start. We gotta
guess...
fight back. We gotta push back against this like fat positive movement, because it's basically saying like being unhealthy is aesthetic, whereas being healthy is not really aesthetic. Because I mean, it's not like this. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess for me, this stuff is just super, super simple to me, which is what's so frustrating, that it's not simple to everybody else to understand this stuff. It's really simple. If you want to live longer and healthier, which everybody should at least want that. I understand if people don't live that lifestyle for various reasons. I don't always live that lifestyle. Sometimes I drink too much alcohol with my friends. Sometimes I stay up too late, like right now, live streaming with you guys when I should be sleeping, which I'm going to need to go to bed soon. We're not robots, right? We can't always live the perfect lifestyle, but we should all aspire to have healthy lifestyles and want to live longer and healthier. That shouldn't be complex, and that shouldn't be controversial. If you understand those things, and then you just do the research and the science and listen to the smartest scientists, then you know what that means. It means obesity, bad, very bad for your health. It's really bad. COVID-19 is a great reminder for people of that. People are like, oh, obesity is like the worst thing besides aging for COVID-19. Your chances, if you get it, of surviving. Yeah, like we already knew that about other viruses like influenza and other diseases. Obesity, bad. What are the other things that we know? Aging, bad. These things are not complex. They're very simple. So while I respect Richard and I respect other people who say like, "Hey, people are dumb," essentially, like this isn't Richard's words. Don't take me out of context, but basically like people are dumb. You can't explain it to them with longevity. You have to explain it to them like we're going to try and cure child cancer and stuff. Which guess what? If we are making you biologically younger and using all these rejuvenation technologies, then we will default cure all these diseases like childhood cancer as well too. And if we're doing gene therapies and stuff, then hopefully we'll figure out even things like progeria, which are making kids, be born with super short telomeres and making them basically old when they're, young chronologically. So my general point is that I don't have all the answers because to me, this is all just common sense and everybody should already understand this, but they clearly don't. And most people, like I was not some genius growing up in school. Far from it. I was a class clown. I always got good grades because I knew that was important. I was always playing the game. I wanted to get good grades just to get to the next level because mom and dad and society told me that was important because I didn't want to be a bum. I didn't want to. But like I was never some genius. I guess in a way I was smart because I found ways to get good grades.
Your number one priority was to be cool. It's okay. I understand. I was there too. I actually sacrificed my grades to be cool in high school.
Totally. That was me to a certain extent. And I've always been very social. I partied a lot in college and I drank too much in my 20s and I've paid for it. I think it enhanced my.
So did you ever get your biological age tested?
Well, the only time I've really had that done in any type of a scientific manner was I had my telomeres measured when I was 28 in 2013. It showed a biological age of 21. So I actually have that report right over there in my closet, like right there, and I have it digitally. If you guys want to see it, I'll share it with you. But like I said with Richard in the live stream, that was just a snapshot of my white blood cell telomere length in 2013. It's really not that crucial. I would imagine my biological age is a little bit younger than what I am right now at 35, but I can tell you from how I feel and how I look, I am not a spring chicken. I'm not 19 years old anymore. I look back at pictures of that. I'll pull this up right here. I found a picture of me from Facebook from when I was like 19. Obviously, I'm 35. It wasn't uploaded when I was 19, but it's a picture from around then, and then a picture.
Oh, you can pull up Brent's Facebook. Should he?
Well, you can pull it up and look at it, but this is a picture that I put together, so you'll have to look at what I'm about to show you. So here it is. So it says defeat aging, right? And so there's me when I was 19. I mean, just look at my jawline, look at my hairline, look at things like that, right?
Yeah.
The skin,
the skin, everything. And then it says defeat aging, and then look at me. That's from when my son was born in November 2019, so about 6 months ago. So clearly you can tell, like, hey, that looks like the same person. But I mean, clearly you can tell that I've aged, dramatically. And I've drank too much at certain times. Haven't lived the healthiest by eating some crap sometimes. But compared to most Americans, like, I still play a lot of sports. I live a really clean, healthy lifestyle now and have for the last few years. Eat organic whenever I can, try to follow my microbiome diet, get good sleep, all this. I mean, I'm doing all of this stuff, right? Everything that I know nowadays is on as intense as possible to be as healthy as possible. And I look like just a worse version of when I was 19. I was just super, super healthy, good looking. And it's not a sad story. I don't lose sleep over this at all. I'm just pointing out that, like, I interview all these scientists who are mainly like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and some 70s, and they're like, "Oh, you're young. What are you worried about? You're 35." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm bald. My knees, were falling apart. I had to get stem cells.
Yeah.
I can already feel my body is not as young." And I remember what it was like to be 22. I was a monster on the basketball. I was never like great at basketball, but my endurance, my athletic performance, that starts dropping off when you're 25. I mean, Alex, I think you're 23 right now.
Yeah. So
You
interesting.
got a couple more
fact.
years, and then it's starting to dip down.
I can definitely empathize with like sort of like paying the price for what I did in high school. Essentially, like for me, it wasn't so much drinking; it was more like drugs, like really hard drugs, like the stimulants and opiates and shit. But it really did a number on my body, and I can tell when I look in the mirror. Like essentially, I know for a fact I'm younger than Rowan, but I look about Rowan's age, and I think maybe it's because of my lifestyle, but maybe it's also because of like my genetics. I'm basically like I'm Slavic, and Slavic people age fucking horribly. I don't know if you've ever like seen like the like been to an Eastern European country. Basically, just like the women look really fucking hot in their 20s, and then suddenly when they like they hit 25, they turn into like an old babushka lady. It's just like we just age so horribly. I wish I was Japanese because they age so much nicer. But essentially, I do feel like I maybe got like. I age my biological age is probably like at least 5 or 10 years more than my actual age. So that's why I've been taking up like fasting and like all these like vitamin pills like magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, the fucking what is it? Nicotinamide riboside and pterostilbene. Been doing those too. Of course, like sleep, exercise. It's been harder with like COVID-19, but essentially I'm trying to like catch up to the clock and make up for every mistake by working harder than everybody else. So, and I'm pretty sure Rowan works very hard too. I kind of envy Rowan because Rowan's known about life extension way longer than me. So, I only just recently discovered it, and I'm like, I know Brent too. Actually, I think you've known about it since like 2008. But yeah, what we need to do is we need to kind of like, I think everybody deep down knows that they should focus on like life extension before mind uploading. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that. But like according to what like Richard Hart was saying, like yeah, sure everybody knows it, but they don't all act on it. So I think the way we make them act on it is to like aestheticize life extension. And I'm gonna sort of like undertake that on Transhumania. I'm gonna try and like aestheticize it because that's what people are attracted to. They're attracted to like I don't want to say beautiful things, but sublime things. Rowan, can you I'm gonna like don't worry, I'm gonna define my terms for you guys. Rowan, can you pull up go on your Google Images? Pull up Immanuel Kant. Is it K-A-N-T?
Oh,
I used to watch a lot of Saved by the Bell when I was a kid, and do you guys remember, if you ever watched Saved by the Bell, they were talking about philosophy in the college years, and it was something like, Zach, can you tell me about Immanuel Kant? He's like, no, I can't. And whenever I hear...
I've heard that Kant pun so many times.
Right, but like whenever I hear that, I just think of that Saved by the Bell clip. I don't know.
There's like a meme I saw with like Kant's face, and it said like, yes, we con, like without the T.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, anyway, what this guy did was everyone was fighting over like what art is and what aesthetics are. And I think he nailed it. So he wrote a book called The Critique of Judgment. Look, guys, art is fucking subjective. Like Rowan, it's based on your life experience. Like Rowan, you go through your life experiences are going to be conducive to what you find aesthetic. For instance, you really like the Disney aesthetic. You like the fairy tale aesthetic. Whereas and that might have like for maybe based on your childhood, you watched more Disney than I did. My parents were like really poor and they couldn't even afford like Disney movies. So maybe for me, I got more into like the industrial kind of like aesthetic. Though in fucking high school, I was like goth and whatnot. But like it's based on like we were listening to like different kinds of music based on who our friends were. So obviously, like what you consider beautiful is based on your life experiences. So the beautiful, what Kant says, the beautiful is subjective, but he says there is an objective part of art, and that's what he calls sublime. So there's beautiful, which is subjective, and sublime, or Erhabenheit is what he calls it. Erhabenheit is objective. And he divides it into two kinds of aesthetics. So the first is the dynamic sublime. So pull this. I have to like. We need YouTube videos to explain this to you guys because it's a very complex concept. Rowan, go to your YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
The search bar. Type in mega tsunami.
Mega tsunami.
Sounds like a wrestler from like the 1980s.
Yeah, so basically I need this video to explain what the fuck Kant was talking about, because whenever I try to explain this to people, it's just like so abstract, and they're like, oh, I didn't take philosophy in college, I don't know what this means. So like I actually have to like show you what this means. So
Do I have the right scene?
is it 6 minutes? 6-minute video?
Yeah,
40 seconds?
4, 6,
Yeah, sure, just let it play. It's basically this Korean movie where like there's a giant tsunami in it and the people are running from the tsunami. So here's how I'm going to explain the sublime. So Kant, he divided it into two parts. He says there's the dynamic sublime and the mathematical sublime. So what I'm about to show you in this video that Rowan's playing is the dynamic sublime. And this is objective beauty. Well, he doesn't call it beauty, but this is the objective part of art. Is, for example, what he defines as the dynamic sublime is when you're seeing, it's like he defines it as danger plus safe distance. And essentially what you're seeing in this tsunami, right? You're seeing like all the people run from it, but there's an objective part of you that's reacting to watching this tsunami. So essentially we humans, we evolved with like nerves that react to danger. So whenever there's like an animal chasing us, or we're close to falling off a cliff, we will sort of have this fight or flight response. You guys know what the flight or fight response is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's caused by like your adrenal gland. But Kant says, okay, so we got that, but that only produces like anxiety and fear. So what if you had that at the same safe distance? So essentially, when you activate those nerves, but you don't get the adrenaline release, this is when you get the dynamic sublime. And the dynamic sublime means basically you see danger from a safe distance. And like I'd find myself like Googling this. You ever seen the movie Twister? The end with the giant fucking tornado? I'd Google that scene over and over and watch it. And I feel like that has an objective aesthetic.
With Jodie Foster, right, from the 90s?
Exactly. So
I haven't seen that movie since like the 90s. Is it good? I mean, I don't remember it being great.
At the end of the movie, there's a giant fucking like F5 tornado, and it's like chasing the couple through a field, and it's just that's what Kant means by the dynamic sublime. There's objective parts of aesthetics that respond to like our biology. So while art is subjective, the sublime is objective, and that's one kind. The other kind I'm interested in is actually the mathematical sublime. So I know you guys have experienced this as a kid, but did you ever have you ever lived in a place like that where you could actually see the stars, not just all this fucking like light pollution? Rowan, Brent?
I've never lived in a place, meaning like lived there for a long time, but yeah, I mean I've been out to those places plenty of time. I've been in the Israeli desert with nothing around in many places. In fact, we have a lake house that we're going to next weekend for Memorial. It's at Clear Lake. It's the largest natural lake in California, and Tahoe doesn't count because Tahoe's half in Nevada. It's on the state line. And when we get out to the lake house, yeah, there's not really any industry out there, and we can see tons of stars. There's a lot of lights because it's a lake house and everybody has electricity, so it's not full on. But yeah, I mean, I've been out to the desert in Israel in the middle of nowhere, and it is nothing like anywhere in the city. I mean, you can see tons and tons and tons of stars. It's incredible.
So when you looked at the night sky, what did you feel when you looked at the stars, the countless fucking helicopters in the sky?
Yeah, I mean it's a complex, loaded question. A range of emotions. I just don't understand when people seem to think that like aging is impossible to solve. People have no imaginations. Look up into the stars, man. Like there's hundreds of billions of galaxies and hundreds of billions of stars in each galaxy, and we're probably just one universe of many universes. Reality is probably infinite, whatever reality is. That's from everything that I've learned. That's what reality has taught me at this point in my life. So I just want people to have a greater imagination, to think bigger and dream bigger, because what I've learned is that my biggest regret right now at age 35 is that I didn't try to do more, didn't try to accomplish even bigger goals. I set my goals too small. I read this book. I'll just tell this real quick. I read this book right here, Think and Grow Rich, in like 2011 or something. And this was, remember, the financial crash happened like 2007, 8, 9, right after I graduated college. And I really just wanted to save up $100,000. That was my goal. And I did, because after reading this book in like 2010, and I did it like way faster than even my goal was. And I was like, wow, what if I tried to save up like $200,000 in like the same time? I bet I would have accomplished it. So that's what I've learned from like Elon Musk and really smart people like that. They set massive stretch goals that seem crazy, but then they work rapidly to accomplish those goals. And so that's what I just try and do, just work hard every single day, trying to achieve my goals. And I'm doing that with you guys now, which is really exciting. But I know I'm on a little tangent here, but yeah, when I look up at the stars, that's how I think. I'm just like endless possibility. Look at all those stars out there.
Exactly. Okay, so that's exactly what Kant was saying. So let me, by the mathematical sublime. So what we just watched that tsunami thing, right? So that we all understand what the dynamic sublime is. The dynamic sublime is when you see something that could be dangerous to your biological self, but you are from a safe distance. For example, when you watch like Star Wars and you see like the flying cars moving around the cyberpunk city, you feel the same thing that I feel when like Anakin's about to fall off the fucking flying car and shit. It's like the sense of danger, but we're safe. So that is an objective form of art. Another thing is like the peak of a mountain, or like witnessing an earthquake or a volcano, like that movie 2012 with like the tsunami like going into the Himalayas.
Yeah,
that's sublime. That's the dynamic sublime too. But now Kant says there's another kind of sublime. Rowan, Google this. On your YouTube, type in the observable universe, zoom out into YouTube. Should be like a 3-minute video, 3 minutes, 26 seconds. So what Kant says is there's a second type of sublime, and that's caused, instead of danger, it's caused by sensory overload. When you think of the possibilities, and it overloads your brain, it overloads your nervous system. So when you were in the desert in Israel looking at the stars, perhaps you thought that, hey, what if each one of those things in the sky could have something like this planet that I'm standing on? And what if this could be replicated? Could you think of all the possibilities of it's like the Fermi paradox? What's happening here? Is life possible on all these little dots in the sky? And when you think about that, that's sensory overload. And what Kant defines as the mathematical sublime, Erhabenheit, he defines it as like the concept of the infinite, the concept that you're small compared to something vastly out of your fucking pay grade. And what the video Rowan's about to pull up is basically zooming away from Earth and into like the bigger context, like the galaxies and the fucking like the universe. It's like just the sheer scale of it is an objective kind of beauty that he calls the Erhabenheit, the mathematical sublime. And just as like but there's a problem. Like the more we learn about the natural world, it kind of erodes the mathematical sublime. And here's how I'm going to get people back into life extension. What we need to do is we need to restore like the aesthetic of the infinite. Because when people think about like the mind uploading shit, the AI, the cyberpunk shit, that's all like the dynamic sublime. That's where they get their aesthetics from. What we want to do is we want to harness the mathematical sublime. We want to get people to understand what an infinite life would be like, what you could do with an infinite life. And when they understand what the possibilities of an infinite life would entail, they will experience Kant's mathematical sublime. They will, just by thinking about it, by thinking about all the possibilities you can do if you just had infinite time, how many lives would you be able to live? They can't process this information. Their mind just fucking crashes. And when your mind like goes fucking blue screen of death on you, that's when you get the mathematical sublime. And that's what attracted me to life extension. And I think it was just because, like Rowan's videos, Rowan was talking about like imagining like what you would do with all these possibilities, and like it's not something you see, it's something that gets conceptualized in your brain, where like you are so small compared to what you could be and what is around you. So that's just kind of what I wanted to get at, like how we get people into this movement is we can't reason with them. We can't say like, oh, look at the dying child, look at the dying child. Oh, look at all these old people dying of diseases. You have to give them a concept of the infinite, and only then will they understand, because that's what made religion so powerful. Zoroastrianism was the first religion to say, hey, actually, you can live forever. That was the first religion to say that. All the other religions, the pagan religions, the Native American religions, the Buddhist, Eastern religions, all of them said, oh yeah, well, when life ends, you just die, you go into the dirt, and you eventually become something else. But the Abrahamic religions, descending from Zoroastrianism, were the first ones to say, actually, after you can just keep going, you can just keep living forever. Like there's going to be no end. Can you think of the possibilities of what you would do with infinite lifetimes? And that's basically what we need to restore into getting people into this movement. So that's another reason, like Richard talked about, like stop it with the atheism bullshit. Like just sort of like put that on hold. Like you can bring it back later. But to get to this movement, you have to give them a concept of the mathematical sublime that rivals their religion's concept of the mathematical sublime. So, yeah, okay, that's enough Kant for today. What were you guys gonna say before I fucking went on that tangent?
Well, let's answer a couple of questions here in the comments. So our good friend Aging Reversed had a couple comments here about 10 minutes ago. He said, it seems to me that mind uploading is further away than life extension through biotechnology. And yeah, I think that that's completely true. And I think that that's something that everybody should consider and focus on. You know, biotechnology revolution seems to be right around the corner. And the rejuvenation technologies that we report on and are interested in and are interviewing all these scientists tell me that there's some exciting things happening now, and probably some exciting things happening like in the next few years, like exciting stuff. I'm not talking about living indefinitely or like dramatically reversing aging in the next few years, maybe in the next like 10 or 20. And in the next few years, I think you're going to see maybe, a few years like getting reversed, on Steve Horvath DNA methylation clock and telomere lengths. Look at what Liz Parrish has done. We'll see. A lot of people hate on Liz Parrish for what she's done, and I just say, hey, time will tell. She's 49 years old right now as we sit here in 2020. She'll be 50 soon. If she didn't really do this, or if it didn't work properly, we'll know for sure in about 10 years from now, because she'll be about 60 then, chronologically, and you can't keep this up long, if it didn't really work. And I think she looks great, and I think that, looks are everything when it comes to this age reversal stuff, and if somebody looks like they're 35 years old, but they're actually 70, then they're doing something for sure. And I'm not talking about...
That's a big argument for our side, if like the messenger looks good.
I'm not talking about, plastic surgery and makeup. I'm talking about up close, in person, looking at their skin. I can tell pretty well if somebody's had plastic surgery and has a wig on or had, hair transplant, whatever. I've seen Liz up close just last time, in October of last year is the last time I saw her at RadFest. And she looks very, like, for example, my wife and I interviewed her at her home last year in July of 2019. And, we got really up close with her at that time, and she was very nice. And we had a great time at her house. And when we left, my wife and I got in the car and we drove home. And I said, Lauren, if you had never seen her before, Lauren's my wife. I said, if you had never seen her before, how old would you think Liz would be? And she said, she looks like about the same age as like one of our friends, and we're in our mid-30s. My wife is 34. She'll be 35 next week. I need to get her a birthday present. And and I'm 35. She looks like one of our friends in our mid-30s, I think, personally. So I think she looked pretty darn good before she did this telomerase gene therapy 5 years ago in 2015. For her age, when I say pretty darn good, I'm not talking about her attractiveness. I'm talking about her youth, her health. And I think she looked very youth and healthy at that time. So yeah, we'll just have to see how this is science. This is, you iterate, you constantly have a hypothesis and you change it based off the results. And so I just went on a tangent there, but the next, comment from Agent Reverse said, people don't have time for imagination. Most people try to survive. It's always been like that. Maybe it will change in the future through automation. So essentially what Agent Reverse is referring to is Maslow's hierarchy of needs in that comment. So yeah, life is tough. Read any type of book or narrative from 100 years ago or plus. Life was really tough. Life is getting better. read Steven Pinker. There's all sorts of data to show that in every single way, reality is getting better. Yes, there's climate change and there's certain things to cherry pick, but I believe that technology and science will solve those things. And I'm not as concerned about climate change as most people are. I have a lot more respect for the planet, and I think the planet is way more intelligent than me or you or anybody of our collected minds. And if you don't agree with that, just type in George Carlin Saving the Planet into YouTube. It's a 7-minute video. Keep an open mind. You will get smarter. There's nothing wrong with the planet. The planet's fine. We're screwed. The people are fucked if we don't.
It's life that's fucked, not the actual.
Yeah, the planet will be fine. The planet will dust itself off and clean itself up. It'll be fine. So, yes, Aging Reverse. I agree with you. People haven't had much imagination throughout time, but look at the smartest, wealthiest people on the planet right now. They have some pretty cool imaginations, and we're creating some pretty cool stuff. So we need more people to just get more wealth, more skills. You should be focusing on acquiring skills. That should be your number one thing that you are trying to do on this planet. The more skills you acquire, the more benefit you can be to others and to yourself, and the more self-reliable you will become. So is it fun for me learning all this stuff about YouTube and thumbnails and all this stuff about social media? No, it's not particularly fun. But I've gained a lot of skills in the last years. I've learned more about social media and networked with great people like Alex and Rowan and Max and all of our, viewers and subscribers here. And I'm continuing to learn every day. So people will become more imaginative and creative with the skills they acquire and the things that they have. So the next thing Aging Reverse said is, would you travel the stars as a tourist in the future if the technology was available and you were ageless, or would you be too afraid to risk your life? Of course, as long as the risk is low. Everything's about risk. That's what every single question in reality is all about. Gauging risk versus reward. This is the thing that's very difficult to do for some people. That's why when I invest in something like Tesla, some people will be like, oh, that's super risky. I'm like, is it? I think it's super risky not to be invested in Tesla, because I think Tesla is going to continue to go up in value, So risk versus reward is always, I worked at LinkedIn. One of our main core sayings was take intelligent risk. Well, break that saying down. It's really difficult to define what's intelligent and what's not. It depends on the details. So yeah, of course, I want to travel the stars. If it doesn't cost me very much money compared to my net worth, and if it's safe, then you better believe I'm going to be a space traveler. And then the final thing I'll say here is Aging Reverse commented a few minutes ago, if there was a gene editing therapy coming out in the next few months that could reverse aging but cost over $1 million, what would be your reaction? Would you try to get it at any cost or wait? Well, the question implies something in a way that isn't really known. We won't know the safety or efficacy of it. So even if it shows the reverse aging, like let's define that. Let's say that it shows reversal of like DNA methylation clocks, C-reactive proteins, telomere lengths get longer. All these biomarkers show that aging seems to be reversed. That's great. It's exciting. I would still want to get those gene therapies in people and wait at least a few more years to see if there's any side effects. And that's just me personally, because I'm 35. Every single individual should answer that question in a different way. But if the question is, I knew that it had absolutely no side effects, it's true age reversal, yes, I would go into as much debt as possible and work my ass off to get that, because biological youth is really the only thing that matters at the end of the day, because it has the potential to give you more time. Yes, you can still get hit by a bus and you're dead. This game can be over for anybody. Reality can end. It's, a SWAT team can come in and murder me. I'm right into my house right now. Like, the future is unpredictable. But yes, I would definitely do anything to have my biological aging reverse, and for my friends and family and people I care about. That's something Richard Hart talks about all the time. I would go, money is just a made up thing we all made up, right? This is not my opinion. This is very well established. I have all these books behind me that I've talked about money. I've studied the history of money very intensely and thoroughly. Money is just a concept we made up. So why would you let some concept we made up in our head to control us and to make our lives better? That's what money's supposed to do. It's supposed to improve our lives. Why would you use that to not give you what everybody wants, which is more time on this planet to be healthy. So yeah, there's one more question here by Salvin. Alex or Rowan, do you guys want to take that one? And then I got to be off the bed here in the next few
Sure,
minutes.
I'll take this one. Yeah, we'll wrap it up after this last question. Salv says, some normies would often conflate transhumanism with woo and New Age religions. Is there a way to prove transhumanism should be taken seriously and not viewed as pseudo-intellectuals? For instance, a lot of people who aren't pseudo-intellectuals are transhumanists. We've, even within academia, but essentially, there's no way to prove that it's not New Age other than like looking at New Agers and showing how country are. Like, just go to my channel, just click on any video, scroll down in the comments, and you'll like see some New Ager with some hardcore hate on me. Basically just like, oh, you're messing with the natural order of things. The age of Aquarius is supposed to align our chakras and shit. They don't like transhumanism because the incorporation of technology into the human body fucks with their ability to form cults and things like that. Another thing is like life extension. The whole idea of a cult is predicated on giving your followers an afterlife, essentially. I don't know if you guys watched the it's Waco. It's like a new show on Netflix.
I haven't watched the show, but I'm very familiar with the Waco story.
Yeah, it shows you kind of like how a cult operates, and usually a cult has to offer you a concept of Kant's mathematical sublime. So they have to give you some kind of concept of infinity to get you like to aestheticize their cult, and then you get into it. And if you have these transhumanists proposing people an alternative through like science and technology, the New Agers fucking hate that. Like and they will tell you that they hate that. They'll be like, so some of the comments will be from like fundamentalist Christians who are like usually perhaps older people like boomers who like they have this very like limited idea of Christianity. It's just whatever their local pastor told them, or like whatever the kind of variant their town subscribes to. They didn't have the internet when they were growing up, and they didn't have the ability to conceive of other ways a religion could operate. So be very sympathetic to them. Don't get into arguments with them. Look for the New Agers, though. The New Agers offer different kind of arguments. They don't say like this is satanic. The Christians will come to my channel and say like, oh, this is satanic, that's satanic, that's satanic, whatever. Just I ignore that. But the New Agers.
I think the main reason that transhumanism gets conflated with the New Age and pseudo intellectualism is literally mind uploading. If you just remove mind uploading and you just it's just anti-aging, like that's not, people aren't gonna conflate that with New Age. Like who's
well, actually, New Age is actually very anti-mind uploading. Like here's a good example of what I'm talking about. There's a New Age channel called you can go to YouTube and Google it. It's called Spirit Science, and essentially the entire channel is to convince you that like don't worry, when you die, you will be reborn as something else as long as you follow the teachings of this cult.
Nobody knows what happens when you die. Like, how are people this gullible, really? To like almost everybody, statistically speaking, like falls into this trap at some point in their life. Normally, when they're children. I was like 5 years old, and I was fortunate enough because my mom's Jewish, my dad was Catholic. I was like, wait a minute.
You got two perspectives.
I got two perspectives, and I could easily see as a 5-year-old. Even I actually was younger than that from the very beginning. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. These adults are lying. You can tell that the adults were lying, like because one of them are saying one thing at church, in the Christian church, and then they're saying like something else in synagogue. And I was, Jewish synagogue, and I was smart enough, developed enough as a brain. I wasn't a genius. I'm not like making myself out. I was just a normal kid. But because of this particular situation, my brother was 2 years older than me. We could talk to each other like, hey, the rabbi just said that it's this way. And he didn't just say, it might be this way. The rabbi said, it is this way. And God says it's so. But weren't we just in church the other day? And the priest just said, it's actually this way. And it's not kind of this way. It's not maybe this way. It is this way. And aren't those conflicting? And my brother would be like, yes. And we'd be like, so this is just all a bunch of bullshit, right? Yes. Well, then why are mom and dad taking us to this stuff? I don't know. I guess it's just a test, and we just figured it out.
I can forgive like Catholics and Jews because Catholics and Jews are most likely growing up around other Catholics and other Jews who are parroting that narrative back to them. But the New Age people, I have a whole different kind of contempt for because they are like locked in their own little world on purpose. Like they have friends and family who aren't New Age. They have a town. They live in a town that's not New Age, but they congregate in this cult, and they say, when you die, you will be reincarnated into Thoth when Mercury is in retrograde, and then the age of Aquarius will begin, and your soul will go to. I was just thinking that.
Aquarius.
You ever seen like a
40-year-old virgin?
40-year-old virgin?
Yeah, of course. I need to.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah,
I need to take like a week off from like working my ass off with you guys and just go back and watch a bunch of old comedies. There's so much good stuff out there. Life is so.
We should in accordance with fair use, we should do a live stream where we just put a movie on and like we get some popcorn and like beers and whatever, and we just critique the shit out of it, or like.
I'm down.
Yeah,
listen. I've had fun. Aging Reverse said, thanks for answering my questions. It was nice seeing you all. It's nice seeing you as well too, Aging Reverse. We can refer to you by your real name. I actually, I'm friends with you on Instagram. As long as you're cool with that. If you don't want people to know who you really are, then I want to respect your privacy there. So let us know on that. But I think it's 1:46 a.m. here, and my son is he normally wakes up around 4:30 to 5.
Oh, so you're gonna get like 3 hours of sleep.
Well,
let's
no.
So to quickly wrap it up, New Agers don't like mind uploading because it competes with them. They don't like it when you compete for people's attention. So they just say, "Oh, it's evil machine. You will be turned into a toaster, and a toaster can't think." That's basically the gist of their argument. But anything else before we wrap it up?
The question isn't just about the New Age. It's why do people conflate transhumanism with pseudo-intellectuals and woo? So my point is, regardless of the New Age, just the mind uploading stuff, that could be conflated with pseudo-intellectualism if they're claiming that the consciousness can be transferred.
Oh yeah. So that goes back to Chalmers. Chalmers says mind uploading isn't scientific because science has the verification principle and the falsification principle. If you can't verify that Rowan has been uploaded into a computer and you can't falsify that it is, all you can do is ask it fucking questions, and that's not science. That's just faith. You have to have faith that Rowan was uploaded into the computer by asking it if it's Rowan. So there certainly is woo in transhumanism, but not all of transhumanism. Like transhumanism actually came from a scientist. Like Julian Huxley was the first transhumanist, and he said all it really is like using science to improve the human condition. And I mean, you could call that mind uploading, but what he was talking about was like using genetic engineering and like eugenics and shit to eliminate disease, extend the human lifespan, eliminate starvation, like this basic shit. That's what he was talking about. Julian Huxley had no conception of robots or mind uploading or AI. Like he lived in the 1940s or whatever, or 1950s at the peak of his career. There was no fucking robots or mind uploading, anything like that.
Right.
So when he figured out transhumanism, that's what he defined it as. The reason it got distorted to this like robot stuff is there was a futurist by the name of Faridun Esfandiari. He goes by FM 2030, and he was a huge influence on like combining transhumanist ideas from Julian Huxley with these like robotic he was Persian actually, so with Zoroastrian ideas about like the fresh kareti, where the humans get transformed into at the end of time they go through a lake of molten metal and become metal people. So it was like he brought the Zoroastrianism into the science, and that's what became the whole robot thing. And then I think Brent, your interview with Natasha Vita-Moore, I think she was maybe influenced by FM 2030. She mentioned him in the interview.
About that more.
But yeah, so basically, it doesn't have to be pseudoscience, and it doesn't have to be woo. A lot of the influences came from things that were outside the original doctrines of what transhumanism was supposed to be. But in a sense, it's really just like self-overcoming. That's what I'll define transhumanism as, is self-overcoming, any form of self-overcoming. So that could be improving your community, could be improving your ethical system. It could be just questioning what you were told, questioning your beliefs, and like creating your own system of ethics that's better suited to the changing world. It doesn't have to be scientific. Like transhumanism is just like it's sort of a moral imperative, a categorical imperative, where you act according to this maxim, and you that you would have everyone else act in accordance with. So that's more Kantian than Nietzschean. Nietzschean said you should just create your own ethics. But either way, it's you're doing something to improve your condition.
It's funny because like I relate more to like half of these like health gurus, like Rhonda Patrick and all these different health gurus on YouTube. They're not even transhumanists. Yeah, but they don't categorize themselves as transhumanists. But
I don't go around categorizing myself as a transhumanist
either. I think we should just drop that. I think we should.
I totally categorize myself. You know why I categorize myself as that? Because the definition of it is so fluid. I can use it to talk about whatever I want. And here's why that's important. Here's why that's fucking important. Because when you categorize yourself, you limit your way of being. Like literally, you can linguistically construct your own prison. For instance, if you say, I'm an atheist, you have linguistically constructed a prison, a mental prison. If you say, I am a communist, you have linguistically constructed a prison that doesn't let outside ideas bump into whatever would contradict with Marx. That's why I use transhumanist, because it has no central doctrine. It's very decentralized. And essentially, the only thing you have to agree with in transhumanism is that we should improve society somewhat. So it's so fucking vague that if maybe society changes and nobody cares about AIs or mind uploading, I'll be able to find something else and call that transhumanism.
Yeah.
So the reason I call myself a transhumanist is because it's like conceptual freedom, it's intellectual freedom to talk about whatever the fuck you want. There's just like it's associated with life extension, so that's what I focus on most because that's what's most important to me. That's the way I want to improve the human condition.
Plus, if we want to improve the movement, we have to associate with it so we can guide it in the right way, in the right direction.
Exactly, that's what I want to do. I want to aestheticize the mathematical Erhabenheit, the mathematical sublime, and I do that by asking people, like, here's how you can conceptualize of infinity. If you go to, like, my videos, that's essentially what the goal is of every single video, is to sort of conceptualize how you can get to the infinite. And then once you have that sensory overload, it kicks in, and it takes primacy over everything else in your life. It worked for me, so I'm assuming it'll work for everyone else. That's all I have to say about that.
Love it. All right, guys. Wifey texted me. She said, "Come to bed." It's almost 2:00 in the morning, and I am pretty delirious. I've been on this Skype now with you guys for 8 hours and 49 minutes. So,
all right, yeah. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
So good. No, seriously though, good work today. And tomorrow morning, I'm gonna edit the Natasha Vita Moore. I'm gonna record the little Gene the Chromosome part in there, put that in. Hopefully, I'll get that out on my channel tomorrow. And we'll cross-promote Gene the Chromosome within our longevity brand. Good work on this today with you guys. And Richard Hart, that was a nice little random surprise. I just thought, hey, might as well message Richard and see what's up. And he's like, yeah, let's do a live stream. 3 hours later, we just did a live stream with Richard Hart, and he's awesome. He tweeted, so make sure you guys retweet that if you haven't yet. I'm sure he'll get a lot of likes and retweets from that. And yeah, I'm really excited about the other collabs we're going to do and the people we're going to network with, and hopefully we can have a real impact on this stuff. I really, really want to improve lives. One thing Aubrey de Grey says is that if we literally just like cure aging and bring escape longevity, escape velocity 1 day sooner, that's 110,000 lives that we can save. Just bringing it 1 day sooner, like, what bigger mission to work on than this? Like, we could literally end up doing all of the things that people have thought were impossible. Or if we don't do that, maybe we just like get 1% of that and we save 1,000 lives a day, or slow it down, right? Maybe we don't save lives and everybody ends up dying at some point, but we slow it down. We give everybody a few extra years of quality of life to spend with their grandkids or whatever, or their great grandkids. I'm cool with that too. Like, whatever happens, happens. All I know is that I'm working hard with you guys, and I'm really enjoying the things that we're doing, and hopefully we can have an impact. So it's been awesome to work on this with you guys and connect and meet all these cool people that we're meeting in this community too.
Ditto. Heck yes.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. May you live forever. Death to the Reaper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.